Now back to the show. This is AM 650's The Law Show.
Welcome back to the program. Sterling Fox with guests from Murphy Batista LLP, Vancouver personal injury law firm. Scott Stanley and Diana Robertson are with us today. And one of the themes we're talking about on the program today is Scott's rather stunning declaration that in British Columbia we are experiencing, again, another shortage of lawyers. And therefore, that reduces, for everyone in the province, our ability to access justice. Square the circle for us, Scott. How does a shortage of lawyers deny access to justice for an entire population?
Well, the vast majority of people that have legal issues, I first came across this. I used to do legal aid clinics where you'd go in and you would typically be giving people advice, and you would just see the changing nature of the client. These were people that were no longer very, very poor. These are people that were very, very middle class, and they were unable to find lawyers to help them out. And as well in our firm, we're a boutique firm, and so when we come across an issue that we don't deal with, like an immigration issue or a family issue, we're looking to retain a lawyer for our client. And even as lawyers, we were having a tough time securing retainers for our clients.
Just finding someone appropriate to refer a client to.
Yeah, fewer lawyers and more expensive. And what it boils down to is when you have, it's a supply and demand. If you have fewer lawyers, there are fewer services available, and those services become more expensive.
And one of the things, if I can just interrupt with this, because you mentioned legal aid, and suddenly, as you've already said, the middle class is finding itself in a position financially where legal aid is beginning to make more and more sense because, the cost of housing, and this is the most expensive city to live in Canada already, and throw some lawyers' fees in on top of that, it can be crippling for some. And we're hearing, Scott, about reduced legal aid support for people instead of going in the other direction.
Well, legal aid's been dead for the longest time. For civil matters, for family matters, it's mostly dead. And it's really not there to the extent that it's going to provide any meaningful service to the people that need it. If you're a criminal and you've been convicted, there's funding for that.
Right.
But for regular people, law-abiding people that just want to solve their disputes civilly or for family matters, it really doesn't exist. And which sort of annoys me because when a lawyer sends a bill, I have to add 7% to it for PST. And that money was meant to fund legal aid, but it's never done that.
Okay.
And it's a bone of contention for all lawyers.
Right. It's like you also have a bit of a bone to pick with the government over ICBC and the same kind of thing, because the government typically raids the till at ICBC to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars a year, denying ICBC an opportunity to build its own financial largesse and handle more claims appropriately.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. The ICBC doesn't pay taxes, so it makes transfer payments.
Sure.
That's all well and fine.
It's a crown corporation.
Right, but just let there be some clarity with that. Don't go and tell everybody that there's no money to pay claims when the government is taking money away from it. There just needs to be more transparency there.
Diana Robertson, when you decided, you were telling us just before the break that you decided you put all your marbles in one bag and said, I'm taking one shot at becoming a lawyer. I'm going to apply to UBC and close my eyes and cross my fingers and hope to heck it works out. And it did.
It did.
Had you not been successful at UBC, unlike most everybody else who was contemplating going to law school, you had reduced your options. You had only the one. You hadn't applied to 9 schools across the country.
Yeah, I think, I was just in a really fortunate position. I have a career. I was established. I lived in Vancouver. I was fortunate to have a home here in the city, and I was quite comfortable. So for me, the change in career wasn't out of necessity. It was a choice, and so many of my friends and some of my family kept saying, why are you doing this? You've got a company, you've got a career, you're very comfortable. Why would you do this to yourself? And for me, I'm a bit of an education junkie and was just really keen to try something new, try a new challenge.
Plus, you had also, for years and years and years, been exposed to the positive contributions lawyers, especially personal injury lawyers like Scott and the gang at Murphy Batista, do for their clients. And watching these people in the trenches in action, battling on behalf of their clients against some pretty monolithic outfits,
Absolutely.
that definitely left a distinct impression on you, didn't it?
And I think, Sterling, I mean, quite frankly, I saw some really, really good legal work done, and I saw some that wasn't so good. And so, as a clinician, I thought, I met some lawyers who I aspired to be like, and some that I thought I could do more for this person than this lawyer is doing. And so when it came time for me to, when I did get into law school, and then when it came time to look for articles, again, I'm a little unusual. I think most articling candidates, most people looking for articles, they spread a wide net. They send out their resume to many, many firms.
Okay.
And I don't know if Scott knew this, but I basically had a very narrow group of law firms that I was, I guess I'll say, willing to consider, but that were on my radar.
Okay.
I wish I'd have knew that we were negotiating your salary.
So I knew where I wanted to be, and I knew where I didn't want to be.
Sure.
So that was really helpful for me. It was, but most individuals, when they're applying for articles, they're just hoping to get something.
Sure. And what happens to both of you? What happens if you're a law student, you graduate the course, you've got your LLB, your degree, but you have, for whatever reason, not been accepted anywhere as an articling student. So you can't finish the program, and you have to article before you can become a lawyer, right? You can't just graduate with your degree and say, sign me up. You actually have to do that articling, don't you?
That's correct.
So what happens if you can't get accepted by a firm? You've got everything else you've met all the other conditions, Scott. What do you do? Just tread water for a year?
The reality it is that people that don't find an articling position within the first year are probably not going to article. And that's, again, why we have a shortage of lawyers. We're pumping out, Diana would know better than I, the number of grads per year, probably 500 a year.
I was going to say 400 to 500.
400 to 500 a year.
Right.
And there might be 150 articling positions.
Okay.
And of those articling positions, maybe half get kept on. So we might be making 75 new lawyers a year, maybe 100.
Out of a crop of 500.
And we have an expanding population. I think there's more lawyers that are leaving the profession. There's more than 100 lawyers that are leaving the profession, I would venture to guess. And again, that just contributes to the problem. We have fewer lawyers supplying the demand that's increasing for the population. And one of the reasons there's fewer articling positions, they're terribly expensive.
Oh, so it is unlike the medical intern with the incredibly long hours and really terrible pay. Do articling students get better paid than medical students?
That's a matter of opinion, right?
I'm sure it is. And I'm sure more than a few medical students were going, anybody gets paid better than medical students.
But the thing that's different with medicine, when we graduate doctors, the vast majority of them are actually going to practice in some fashion.
Sure.
And Diana can talk about this, but in law school nowadays, more than half the class is comprised of women because women do better in university. In undergrad, they get in, they're smarter, they get in. But it's really, really hard for women to practice law part-time if they want to have kids. And a lot of women are younger than Diana, and they are about to enter the stage of their life where they're going to want to have a career, they're going to want to have kids.
Right.
And it's very, very, very hard for them to have both if they're going to want to work part-time, because part-time employment just doesn't really match well with the overhead at these big firms. And so we have a lot of women that just unfortunately leave the profession, whereas you have a lot of doctors that'll work maybe 3 days, 4 days a week.
Sure.
And our profession just really doesn't accommodate part-time work very well. And then again, that reduces the number of people that are participating and working as lawyers.
Can I change gears for a second? I wanted to ask you about another law school that's within our precincts here, and that's the one out in the valley there at Trinity Western University, which has a peculiar sort of approach to accepting students. And Diana, you've been through the accepting process at UBC, so you've done the dance and been through all the hoops. Well, at Trinity Western, in addition to whatever academic requirements they stipulate you must meet, they also won't won't take you unless you sign some kind of agreement for behavior or attitudes or whatever. And it has been seen by some to be a discriminatory document. And the law societies in Nova Scotia and Ontario have already said, well, and of course Trinity Western isn't taking this sitting down. They're going to file there's going to be some friction between these provinces and this school in Vancouver. But it's a perception issue, Scott, first of all. The document that's required to sign, obviously it's a legal document. It's a law school asking you to sign it, but it creates some kind of public perception of what a lawyer at this school might be like versus a lawyer from UBC, where Diana's from.
Well, I haven't actually seen the document they require students to sign, but it's my understanding that they have to abstain from sexual intercourse if they're not married. They have to abstain from any sort of, if they're same-sex people, they can't engage in those activities.
Right, right.
And I mean, as a university, I think they're free to educate and offer whatever course load they want. But it's another thing altogether if you're asking a law society to accept that as a degree. And you know,
thus the rejection by 2 Canadian provinces already.
Well,
and we haven't heard from all of them yet either, have we?
Well, our law society initially came out and said yes, we'll accept those.
And now
degrees.
BC's reconsidering too, aren't we?
Well, it's reconsidering because the membership at large was outraged at that, because it really makes a lawyer's hair stand up on the back of their neck when you hear that there's a discriminatory practice and it's going to be endorsed by a law society.
Right.
And I don't think you can argue that it's not a discriminatory practice. I mean, one of the things that affects access to justice is the number of applicants that come in, the number of lawyers, but the type of lawyers. You want your lawyers to be a mosaic, a representation, or good representation of what the greater community is. And I think if you're going to be flooding the market with another 90 or 100 grads that are where they've probably excluded people that are going to be gay or lesbian, that's not fair. That's going to reduce the participation, I think, of gay and lesbian lawyers in the profession. And I think most lawyers think that's not cool.
By the way, Diana, was your grad class, you just graduated on Friday, was your grad class, as Scott says, in a small microcosm way, very reflective of the community at large?
Absolutely, and I think the move at Trinity is really contrary to what I saw, what I experienced at UBC, where they're really making some real concerted efforts to be inclusive. They're increasing the number of Aboriginal students.
Right.
They're really making a concerted effort to include persons with disabilities, persons of different sexual orientations, and so their move at UBC is in the opposite direction, and also, like, back when I did my my master's at Dalhousie, before I was accepted into that program,
and this is in Nova Scotia.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, I had to actually sign a declaration through Dalhousie University that I, as an occupational therapist, would not be discriminatory against anyone for sexual orientation or any other reason. So, for me, fundamentally, what my experience has been at Dalhousie and more recently at UBC is really very different than what Trinity Western is advocating.
And the only reason I bring this subject up is because it's been the subject of much controversy, and you've got law societies in multiple Canadian provinces tossing this football around. And as I say, they're certainly not going to take it all sitting down. They have a position. They're quite strong about it. But the reason I brought it up at all, Scott, is because you wanted to talk on this program about a shortage of lawyers and perhaps public perception as to the legal profession influences those who want to become lawyers, and maybe some people are going, that's just maybe not my cup of tea after all.
I don't know to what degree that affects people. There's plenty of applicants. There's no shortage of people that want to sign up to become a lawyer. And there's, quite frankly, no shortage of new graduates that are in a position to become a lawyer. You know, the real problem is that as things presently stand, a person can't article unless they can find another lawyer who's been a lawyer for a sufficient number of years that's willing to take them under their wing and have them article for him or her.
Okay.
And there is just not a huge incentive to do that. And I can tell you, it's not there's no interest in lawyers to suppress the number of lawyers that are entering the profession. I think we all recognize there needs to be more. It's just really time consuming to mentor somebody. It's very, very expensive. And I mean, about 10 or 15 years ago, the lawyers had an accountant come through. Pretty much every major law firm had a team of accountants sweep through it and identify what's profitable, what's not profitable.
Okay.
And one of the first things to go or to be reduced was articling students.
No money to be made without people in the building.
Yeah, no money. Better to poach people from other firms.
Ah, and is that what the practice is nowadays? Is that why kids coming out of law school are having tough times getting articling gigs because the firms just don't want to bother?
That's yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. That's exactly it.
Interesting.
And I mean, we've been guilty of poaching as well. It's far easier for us to go out and hire a 4 or 5 year lawyer who we know is going to be good and know is going to be invested in this, rather than gambling on somebody who may or may not stay with it.
Okay, so you must feel kind of special here, Diana, having been with that sort of firm attitude, having been selected and made it through the process.
I mean, I really do feel fortunate, and you know, I see the other side of that. As Scott was saying, the challenge for most articling students. My daughter-in-law is articling right now. She was able to get an articling position, but she had a little bit harder time finding something. She would talk to firms and they would say, come back and see us after you've been called to the bar, after you've got a year or two, so they can poach her.
Oh, okay.
My son is in law school right now and is looking for articles for next year, and it's the same kind of thing. A lot of the firms are saying, yeah, we're not sure if we're gonna take on any articling students. If we did, we'd take you, but we're not sure. But come back and see us after you get called to the bar.
How many other family members do you have lined up outside the legal
We're taking
profession?
over, yeah.
Well, Diana's family here sounds like she could save the profession single-handedly, Scott.
Yeah.
We'll take a quick break. Our guests in studio, Scott Stanley and Diana Robertson from Murphy Battista, LLP, online at murphybatista.com. And we're back with lots more after this.
There's more of the show still ahead. This is AM 650's The Law Show.